podcast. This is a very special episode, part 2 with Kiana. We're going to dig into all kinds of things, work and mental health, if there is such a thing. Just kidding.
There is. There actually is. We're going to prove it.
Okay, Kiana is going to prove it, and we are going to learn alongside her. I'm Ashlea, the Orange Lady. I founded The Squeeze to give you the tough but necessary juice you need to build and sustain your career. I have experience in the tech, nonprofit, and public sector, and I've made mistakes so you don't have to. A lot of the things that we talk about, yes, they relate to a first-gen journey, but also the unspoken or unwritten rules of the workplace and how to navigate them. So we're going to talk about so much of that and how you take care of yourself in that. If you did not listen to part 1 with Kiana and learn how amazing she is, you don't have to. Like, you don't need to stop right now, but you might want to, because it just gives so much more context to her expertise and like everything that you're going to share. So either that or listen and then go back and hear her story, because it's fantastic. Okay.
Oh, is it my turn?
Well, yeah. So first of all, and cheers, we are having some Costco Purple Label. That's Costco Prosecco for those of you that aren't watching on YouTube.
No, it's completely delicious, and I'm so glad that we have some. Just making me a little bit less nervous. I like
Good.
It. Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
The bubbles, it does that. Has nothing to do with alcohol content.
Right. Yeah. Just soothing. So, mental health and work. You're like, as I call them, you're 10 to 3, right? Because we don't do a 9 to 5 anymore. I said 10 to 3.
I towards that if my employer's watching this.
No, just kidding. She works so long. But I'm advocating for a 10 to 3.
Okay.
But, you know, you work with JED and mental health, but your target audience is generally younger folks.
Yeah.
And I took an article from JED and I kind of applied it to ways that we can use the same,
skills, really.
Yeah, in the workplace. Yeah. And I want to hear from you. You have so much expertise for adults, for how we take care of ourselves. So, like, where do you want to start?
Okay. I mean, that's a great question. Where do I want to start? I guess it's just, we have mental health at all times, right? Mm-hmm. And that includes at work. And we spend so much of our life and so many hours working and being around colleagues.
Yeah.
And so I think the fact that mental health is being brought more into the workplace, people are thinking more about mental health benefits. Mm-hmm. How do we create environments that are conducive to people being able to take care of their mental health is really important because of how much of our lives we do spend as professionals, really.
Yeah.
So yeah,
that psychological safety, like when I think about like how I feel at work, right? Like my mental health in context to work, because it does like cover everything. Like,
it does.
If things at work aren't going well, a lot of things in the rest of your life are not going well.
Yeah. And vice versa too.
Yeah. Absolutely. Can we talk about ways that like we can take care of ourselves and ways that we can take care of our colleagues, or if we lead a team, like give us both sides of that, because some of it we are responsible for. Yeah. And also all these asshole managers out there, like maybe they could learn something.
Yeah, no, for sure. Everyone can learn something at all times, no matter like what is in front of manager. We can learn lots of things.
Yes.
But no, I think you asked first, how do we even start to think about our own mental health, which is so important. Because I personally am someone, I become super discouraged whenever I start thinking about things that are outside of my control. And sometimes a toxic work environment, it's outside of your control. And so it's like, how do I now take care of myself in this space until I can get to something that feels safer?
Yeah.
And I've been there and I've like had to figure out how am I going to navigate this and still make sure I'm prioritizing myself. It's hard.
It is hard. I spend a lot of time when I work one-on-one, like with strategy sessions and things with the Squeeze, on helping folks establish boundaries. because that's the one thing that I am not an expert in mental health, but I do know that until you are able to have some kind of boundary between you and the work, you're never going to kind of be able to enjoy everything outside of work.
Right, because then it's pouring into everything. So if things are good at work, they're great everywhere, maybe. But if they're not great, then it's pretty not great everywhere.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think those boundaries, mental boundaries, are really important. And so if you can think about health as different spheres. So we have our physical health, which a lot of people think about all the time. Let me go to a doctor. Like, I am hurting here and I don't know where this pain is at, and it's at this level. We're taught how to like manage our physical health. We also have our social health. So are we doing things that like make us feel really good with other people? Like, do we feel like we have the connection we need? Isolation and loneliness were named by like what is it called? What's that person called? I'm not gonna be able to remember this. We're gonna have to cut it.
The Surgeon General?
Yeah, the Surgeon General. I was like, the General of America? The Surgeon General has said that that's like it's a huge mental health and health problem overall.
Yeah.
We also have our mental health, right? And you have your occupational health. You have all these different spheres. So if you can start to kind of think about in certain areas at different times, we're going to be, I'm getting too like far in the weeds. I want to pull out of that.
Okay. So even the Surgeon General, you mentioned even the Surgeon General has advised that
social health is important. And even at work, we have the social health, the mental health, the physical health, like all that does kind of tie into our work, but it is figuring out how to maintain those proper boundaries.
For me, when work is not well, it's not going well, or it's toxic, I then am depleted and exhausted, and therefore then don't even want to like leave the house, don't want to socialize, don't want to call somebody on the phone. And it just becomes like this cycle that,
okay, I have a question. Oh, it's okay.
Okay. Yeah.
How do you know when you're stressed? What are your signals usually? Is it like the isolation a little bit? Like, I don't want to call people.
It usually first starts with exhaustion. Like, I won't be working necessarily longer hours or anything, but mentally I am exhausted. And that often comes when I am not just able to do my job, which this is going to sound like duh, like, but when I am having to spend more time navigating the politics of the workplace, that and getting like accolades or rewards or even just gratitude for the work that I'm contributing, no psychological safety, all of that just exhausts me. You know, I've been in a performance management program before where it was like, every day, am I going to lose my job? Guess what? That exhausts you.
Yeah, of course.
And so that's, exhaustion is my like first sign. If I'm like, if Bethany's like, hey, you want to go on a walk? And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
And it's gorgeous outside.
Okay. And with that, and I want us to take that. So exhaustion is your sign. How do you know when you are thriving? How do you know when you're really well?
Oh, gosh. When I'm able to sleep well, when I wake up without dread,
which would be draining to wake up with dread. It's draining. It seems like it is experience. Yeah.
And when I am excited, I don't have to love what I do. And I want to be very clear. I'm not saying you have to be passionate about what you do. You have to love it. It has to be meaningful. No. But it still has to be, like, it still has to work, right? It still has to have, like, some basic tenets of, like, you are respected.
Yeah.
You feel safe enough to ask questions. So for me, it's when I feel super connected to the team, when I'm able to, like, contribute something that I know is going to, like, help be, a key missing piece, or when something comes up that I'm like, oh, this is my expertise. This is my time to shine, And I mean, I have more energy. Like, I want to do things. I want to talk to people.
So you walked into the trap that I said, which is the perfect trap, because it maybe seems like it makes the most sense in the world, But whenever we are unwell, we like pull back from the things that make us feel better. And it usually is an inverse. So if you can figure out what you look like whenever you're thriving at work and your mental health is thriving, usually you're going to be the opposite whenever you're stressed, the first thing to go. So someone who's usually like very social and who like loves to be around people and gets like all this energy from being around people, one of the first things they're usually going to do is they're going to pull back from people. But that's one of the things that usually makes them feel better whenever they are better, right?
So I didn't completely fall into her trap.
Okay, tell me more.
I do know this about myself.
Okay.
And I do know that even when I'm feeling well, but I'm tired, right? Like say I'm working my 10 to 3 and doing a lot for the squeeze.
Yeah.
So I'm just tired. I have laid out like how Greg and I kind of create community is that he got amazing at cooking New York City pizza, like at home.
Kind of yours.
Yeah. and so we have pizza nights. It used to be every Wednesday. Our travel schedule has changed a little bit, but even when we're tired or exhausted or not feeling great, community and people we love come to us. And so we still get that like warmth, but it is in a way that works for us.
Yes. You're still a little bit in my trap, but I'll give you that. All I will say is that it's really important to look at like whenever you are thriving, whenever you're feeling really well, and whenever you're not feeling so great, they can be opposites of each other. And so to make it all the way into this thriving space where it's like normally I'm super social and I want to go out and I want to see people, you may not be all the way to that, but you're still having your community come to you. So you're getting that social dose, but you're also respecting your need to stay in like your safe place and in your home. It's meeting yourself where you're at. And this can also show up at work, of course.
Yeah. Going into the work sphere, say you have a colleague that you're not close with, like you don't even have their cell phone number outside of work, but you know enough to know that they are not themselves. Like, how would you approach that?
I think so. A lot of it has to do with context, right? So the trainings and workshops that I do are not like, here is the right answer forever in all situations. But it is, how can we start to think through something as complex as I'm saying something and I don't want to not say something.
Yeah.
But I don't want to mess it up either. Like, I don't want to make this worse or potentially like cause harm or put myself in a situation, right? We can talk about that too. But I think one of the things that you can do is just, if there's someone who is usually very chatty in a meeting and they have a lot of really great ideas that they share, and then you see that they're really pulling back and holding back and seem quiet, which is different than their baseline behavior. Okay. So we're looking for what someone's normal or typical is. And whenever they start to go away from that, kind of in either direction, right?
Yeah.
We want to just be like, let me note that. And if we get to a point where our gut is like, say something, we don't need to be a mental health expert to say, yeah, let me just check in. Let me just ask the question.
And you said something, and it is worth repeating. You said when someone's baseline is off, when they are not on their own baseline, not managers, lean in, listen really close.
Listen, Linda.
Listen, Linda. Not when someone is acting differently than your team baseline that, say, is a bunch of communicators that are all really chatty and really social, and someone else is more reserved. No, you don't get to go to them and say, hey, what's wrong? You aren't. No. Everyone works this their baseline. So if you don't know someone else's baseline, don't, approach them with this. This is not what we're talking about.
Yeah, no, that reminds me. So I have a colleague who is my work bestie. Shout out work bestie if you're watching. But I have a colleague who I like, whenever I feel really, really good, I like to have a blazer moment. I like to dress up. I'm on Zoom most of the time, but I still like to wear my blazers. Okay. And she like had noticed that I was dressing up. We were not work besties at the time, so we didn't know each other that well. But she was like, hey, like, you look great. I also just want to check in and see how you're doing. And I was like, oh, I'm good. I'm feeling blah, 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 blah. And she was like, I just wanted to check because whenever I'm feeling bad, I dress up as a way to feel better. So her baseline is she's usually wearing a cute little bandana and a sweatshirt. But whenever she starts dressing up, I now know about her. Let me check in on her because that's opposite. Usually it signals whenever I'm feeling great.
I love how, and see, you all understand mental health. Let's point out what she actually did.
Okay.
Because what she did was say like she made it about her, and it's like, hey, this is my thing. I just want to make sure it's not your thing too, instead of like, hey, like, what's wrong with you? You've been dressing up all the time. Like, I love that, and that's probably a great way to create space with someone you don't know that well.
Yeah, and that is how we became work besties. Is like because it is vulnerable, right? It is vulnerable to check in with people in any sphere of your life, but in work, I want to acknowledge like how much more vulnerable that can be, right?
I feel like I work with people that are so scared to be human and care and talk about these things in a like human way, like not in a specific to you or it, and it really, really is painful to watch and painful to be a part of for me, because I'm like, why are we not just saying, hey, are we so scared that like we're as leaders going to get sued or say the wrong thing? So how do you all, because you're training people about how to notice and speak up, how do you get people okay with not being experts and still asking them to respond to what they see?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I think a lot of it starts in the room. So with trainings for my public health people out there, we're looking at three
Shout out public health.
We're looking at three main things. We're looking at, can we build people's knowledge? So can we educate people on the type of signs that they might see, how they might show up in the workplace if someone's mental health is not, if they're not doing well, right? If they're in this space of stress or distress. Can we also talk about how to start a conversation in a way that's approachable and that gives people the skills that they need to be able to do that well? Also, people are very worried about, okay, I've started a conversation. They've just like said, I'm divorcing my husband. My dog got run over last week, and all of my kids got rejected from all the schools they wanted to get into. And then I accidentally stubbed my toe. Like, what do I do now?
I'm so glad you said that, because we don't often, when we think through, like, I need to have this conversation with Kiana, I know that something is off.
Yeah.
We don't then go 2 steps ahead. It's like, what if she verbal vomits everything? Are you ready?
Yeah.
Like, how can we prepare for those moments as non-experts, just as a caring human?
I'm like someone who very much supports, let's figure out what your language is. So part of those workshops, as well as the knowledge, it is also the confidence to start using these things, or like your self-efficacy. So we practice in the room. So we're going to have a scenario now where you're concerned about me and you're going to open up that conversation. You don't know where I'm going because I'm improvising, right?
I do not know where
it's going to end, right? Yeah. But then we're going to switch. And then we're going to compliment sandwich each other. And that's going to, even practicing in this low stakes situation where it's not actually real, is going to be like, okay, let me think about how I could have done that differently or better. What did I do great though? Like, what should I like hang my hat on? And that is something that I will also always acknowledge, is that sometimes your mind is going to run 1,000,000 miles a minute whenever someone's talking and go blank all at once. And you're like, what do I do? Like, this is really important that I get this right. How do I get it right? We are not always going to get it 100%. So it's first of all giving ourselves grace as humans, because even like people who are experts and professionals don't always get it right. You've probably had a bad therapist at some point. You're like, I don't know. I've had some therapists that have said some questions.
Don't let that therapist turn you off from therapy.
And I was just thinking about that. Therapy is like dating or like finding the right college or job.
Yes, it is.
If you went to one college tour and it wasn't a good fit for you, would you just say, college isn't for me? Or would you keep looking for the right campus and fit for you? Anyways, that's a
sadly, when we need a therapist the most, though, we don't often have the energy to keep dating therapists.
That's true. Which is another thing I'll plug, which is you don't always have to wait. Yeah, you don't always have to wait till it's like you are really, really not feeling good. Like, you can use therapy for so many different things, and you can say, "I'm feeling great, and I just want to keep this going, and I need to learn right now, and I could use someone to help me understand that." I was one time, like, I was in a relationship that I was like, I am so excited about this person, and I really just want to make sure that I'm good and that I can like be healthy in this relationship.
Yeah.
And so I started therapy, not because anything was wrong, but because it was really important to me.
Yeah.
So I'll plug that, but also I think it's important to have space for people that are like, I need someone to meet me here right now, no excuses. And sometimes people don't do that, and that's not okay. So there's that.
Whenever I move to a new city or town, I find a therapist because I don't know when things are going to go sideways, right?
That's actually a good strategy.
I want to find someone when I am at least capable and feeling well enough to do that and enter a relationship, build trust so that when, hopefully never, but when things go downhill, I already have that. And I'm not working against everything in me that just wants to be secluded.
Have the energy to do it, like to search.
Yeah, that's my little, that's my trick.
Yeah. And I, what you say about like hopefully never getting to a point where things go downhill. Yeah. Things will always go downhill. But then they will always come back up. Yes. So I think it's just really important to know how you're going to deal with those like downhills in life. Yeah. And what sort of team you need to build around you, what sort of community you need to build around you to be able to like handle the downhills, because they will come. In my experience, they just keep coming. And like I also keep hitting these peaks where I'm like, I'm just so grateful to be here and alive and like well enough to be able to experience this. Yeah. But I want to come all the way back because you asked, all of a sudden they start laying everything out on you. Yeah. What? Yeah. I think have a couple of different ways that you're going to practice language. Like what language feels like Ashlea responding? What feels good to you? A few like canned responses that I think are actually really good. One of my favorites is, thank you so much for trusting me with this. I know that's not easy. Do you have a sense of how I can be most helpful? How can I support you? I want to be here. Right?
We are not having this. I mean, we are having a real conversation, but just hearing her say that made me so emotional because it felt safe.
Yeah. Yeah. But I didn't respond to anything about the dog or the divorce or any of that stuff. I literally just
no dog
and validated you. Yeah, no dog, no divorce actually. But yeah, you can just validate someone in that and say, that sounds really hard. I would probably be struggling exactly the way you are right now. Is there anything else that I can do? And you can just say that to people, or I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just so glad you told me. I think all of those kind of responses can be, I don't need to solve everything this person has just shared, because that's actually what you don't want to do. You don't want to put yourself in the position of therapist or problem solver. And people, sometimes whenever we're uncomfortable with somebody just shared with us, we're like, how am I going to fix it? And it's like, you can't. But sometimes listening is the healing agent that we need. And so it's learning how to listen and make that person feel heard, feel seen, to feel witnessed. If you can do that, a lot of times that's all people need.
You had said something before about I can't remember what you called it, but it was basically like a follow-up after an initial touch point. A double follow-up. What is that? Why is it so important?
Yeah. So someone taught this to me once. This was actually a lesson I learned because I didn't do it right. And so I would love to tell this story real quick. But there was someone who I was in a Zoom meeting with. I don't know what happened, but they got some sort of really upsetting email while we were in this meeting. And I could tell that their face changed. So I noticed these differences, even though I'd known this person for an hour, right? I didn't know them that long. But I like, I like people. And so, but anyone would have been able to probably, like, this person's face fell. They were just super not focused. They were not in the moment. And so I was just like, are you okay? Like, do you need to take some time? And they were like, yeah, I just got a really upsetting email. I don't really know what to make of it. And I was like, I gave them that compassion and that stuff in the moment. I started the conversation. And then I got so caught up in my day and I got so caught up in my week that I never followed up with them. And of course, like, everything was okay. All of that good stuff. They were okay. They had a lot of like good people surrounding them. Yeah. But they told me later, sometimes people just get uncomfortable and they're like, oh my God, are you okay? Like, is everything okay? And I don't know if you mean it, but that double follow-up says, hey, I know this thing happened the other day. I don't need to know any of the details. I just wanted to see how you're doing. And that really communicates, like, listen, not only do I care about you, but like, you're on my mind. People need that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that feels to me, especially when there is like maybe a power dynamic, right? Like someone reports to someone, or maybe a demographic, like as a white woman talking to a Black woman, I have to be really like mindful, really sensitive of how I approach and make sure that it's not a almost like nosy or like gossipy,
or you're doing something wrong. Like, I noticed you're different this way now, and what is this?
Yeah.
Why?
Right.
Yeah.
When somebody in the corporate sphere is already like every day feeling like I have to code switch and navigate this. And now you're telling me that you notice X, Y, or Z. But I do feel like that double follow-up can help it seem like, even if they didn't want to share the first time, maybe they're like, oh, maybe she is sincere and not just trying to get the tea to,
do something
whatever.
with it that I have no idea what. And I'm in this horrible spot of not
to weaponize against me. Yeah.
Yeah, weaponize is a good way to put it. I think it is so important whenever we're talking about mental health to understand the intersectionality of people and how culture is going to play into how we experience mental health, but also how we talk about mental health, how comfortable we are with these conversations. And just that acknowledgement, I think, is such a good start.
Yeah.
Past that, I think self-disclosure can be really good. So like we kind of already talked about, like sometimes you need to say, like my colleague did, we're from very different backgrounds and all the things. She started with, whenever I'm not feeling good, I do this.
Yeah.
So it let me know she was coming from a place of, she was being genuine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. I typically, because I tend to work in a lot of spaces that are not homogeneous, right? So I usually start any kind of work I do with trust building, because I know that whatever we're going to do together is going to be better if there's some foundation of trust.
Yeah.
And usually that is like something vulnerable about me that I will share, either first gen or, just who knows, depending on the audience. But I do think that it breaks through a lot when you yourself are human and not like, oh, I know how to do everything, but I'll help you figure it out.
Exactly. And I think it's just really important too. I literally talk about this stuff for work, so lots of hours in a day, and most people don't engage with it that much. And even still, I don't get it right all the time, and I do not have all the answers, and I would never argue that I do. I learn from the people in the community that I work with and the feedback they give, the questions they have, even this conversation I've learned from you. Yeah. So if you can look at it as something you don't need to be perfect in, you don't need to perform A+, and just something where it's like, start the conversation, even if you have doubts.
Yeah.
Start the conversation and just have your little responses in the back of your head. Like, no matter what this person says, I will do my best to listen. If it goes beyond listening, I know the resources that I can be like, hey.
I always, if I'm going into, and this doesn't even have to do with mental health, but even just a difficult like work topic, I do my research and I have resources that I can kind of say are available so that I have some understanding. I know you have probably resources for days that we could probably link some to.
Yeah.
But are there any in particular you should share?
Oof. I love a good Psychology Today. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
Looking for a therapist. I just like that you can put in a zip code. You can put in what insurance you have if you have insurance. You can put in if there's a certain gender or like ethnicity or just some identity that's important for your therapist to hold.
I just know Psychology Today is like articles. I did not know that there was that search option.
I'm about to tell you about it.
Fantastic.
It's called Psychology Today. Find a therapist. If you Google that, it will come up and you can put that in. And that's how I found the majority of the therapists that I've had.
Okay.
Another favorite website is Therapy for Black Women. They have really good articles and all the things, but they also have a whole, what's it called? Directory. Yes. A whole directory of therapists. And let's see. JED, our website actually has a really good mental health resource library. So if you Google the JED Foundation Mental Health Resource Library, just articles, and you can literally put in, I'm feeling X, anxious, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling suicidal, and you can read stuff that can really help you link to resources. Gosh, there's so many that are swimming in my head, but we can definitely.
Okay, we'll make sure that there's a list in the notes.
Yeah. The people around you are also really good resources. You're a really good resource to me.
Thanks. You're a great resource for me. This has been, I mean, I have learned so much from you. I continue to. And I think this is a great, like, wrap up spot for this talk because we could keep going forever.
We actually could. We literally could.
But now you have the juice. Time to put it to use. Until next time, because we will have a next time with Kiana. Like, comment, share, let me know that, yes, you want more Kiana. Because I do. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank y'all.
Cheers.